What are you waiting for, old man? Salute me now, demanded the arrogant official. But the frail veteran's response didn't just silence him. It left the entire Pentagon delegation stunned. The early morning mist clung to the polished black granite of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, creating an ethereal backdrop as visitors began to gather. Richard Collins, 78, stood in respectful vigilance near the wall, his stooped figure almost motionless despite the autumn chill. His weathered hands, marked with age spots, rested on a simple wooden cane, while his faded veteran cap sat atop thinning white hair. Though his posture showed the inevitable surrender to time, his pale blue eyes remained alert, scanning the grounds with the measured attention of someone who had never truly left the battlefield. The memorial grounds buzzed with preparation for the National Security Veterans Honor Ceremony. Staff hurried about placing chairs and adjusting the podium, while security personnel established perimeters with practiced efficiency. Collins was part of the Voluntary Honor Guard, retired veterans who maintained a respectful presence at the memorial, offering information and ensuring proper decorum. Delegation arriving crackled a voice from a security radio as 3 black SUVs with government plates pulled up to the designated entrance. From the lead vehicle emerged David Morgan, the Assistant Director of Special Operations at Homeland Security, adjusting his tailored suit with self-assured precision. His expression conveyed barely concealed impatience as he surveyed the memorial grounds. All this ceremony for what's essentially a bureaucratic photo op, Morgan remarked to his assistant. We could have done this at the office and saved everyone the theatrical entrance. Meanwhile, Collins remained at his post, seemingly oblivious of the delegation's arrival, his eyes fixed forward in quiet contemplation. Morgan's gaze drifted across the memorial grounds, eventually settling on Collins. He studied the elderly man with undisguised skepticism, taking in the modest uniform and simple posture. Are these old-timers actually part of the ceremony or just decoration? Morgan asked loudly enough for nearby staff to hear. His assistant glanced uncomfortably at the senior officials nearby. Sir, the Voluntary Honor Guard includes distinguished veterans who serve as custodians of memorial significance, explained Catherine Reynolds, the ceremony coordinator, approaching with a diplomatic smile. Mr. Collins has been volunteering for nearly 15 years. Morgan nodded dismissively, already losing interest in the explanation. What Morgan could know was that Richard Collins wasn't merely an elderly volunteer. Before his body had bent with age, Collins had served with the Army's 5th Special Forces Group in Vietnam, participating in operations so classified that some remain redacted decades later. His personnel file contained commendations signed by generals whose names appeared in history books, and his Silver Star citation described actions that had saved an entire reconnaissance team under impossible conditions. The same mental discipline that had kept him alive through 3 tours in Vietnam now enabled him to stand watch at the memorial for hours, honoring fallen comrades through quiet, dignified presence. I served with men like Collins in the Gulf, offered Colonel Matthews, a Pentagon liaison accompanying the delegation, some of the most dedicated soldiers I've ever encountered. Morgan gave Matthews a skeptical look. No disrespect to veterans, Colonel, but there's a difference between nostalgic sentimentality and actual security effectiveness. These memorial greeters might satisfy tradition, but modern national security demands more than symbolic gestures. We'll take a moment here to appreciate the memorial before proceeding to the ceremony area, Reynolds announced, attempting to redirect the conversation. As the delegation dispersed to view the memorial wall, Morgan seized the opportunity, slipping away and approaching Collins with measured steps. Standing beside the elderly veteran, he examined the modest display of ribbons on Collins' worn blazer. Quite the collection, Morgan commented, his tone suggesting it was anything but impressive. Though I wonder about the practical value of having retirees standing watch over monuments. Collins remained still, his eyes fixed forward, maintaining his dignified vigil. In today's security landscape, we focus on active threat response and tactical flexibility, Morgan continued, raising his voice slightly. The ceremonial approach seems rather outdated, wouldn't you agree? A small group of tourists had gathered nearby, sensing the unusual interaction. Most visitors maintained a respectful distance from the honor guard, but Morgan moved closer, studying Collins with the appraising eye of a supervisor finding fault with an underperforming employee. At Homeland Security, we train our personnel to engage with potential security concerns, not stand by passively, Morgan continued, circling Collins slowly. This Memorial Sentinel approach might please a nostalgic crowd, but effective security is measured by response capability. Wouldn't you agree, old-timer? Collins remained perfectly still, giving no indication he'd heard the provocative comments. Assistant Director called his aide, who had noticed Morgan's deviation from the group. The ceremony preparation is nearly complete. Morgan waved him off without looking back. Just having a professional exchange with our veteran friend here. His emphasis on professional carried unmistakable condescension. The delegation had progressed halfway through their scheduled viewing when Morgan broke away again. This time with such deliberate purpose that several security personnel exchanged concerned glances. A larger crowd had gathered near Collins now, the mid-morning tour groups arriving with their cameras and guidebooks. Morgan positioned himself directly before Collins, whose eyes remained fixed forward in perfect discipline. "Ladies and gentlemen," Morgan announced, his voice carrying the practiced authority of a senior official addressing subordinates. "You're witnessing an interesting contrast in approaches today." He gestured toward Collins. "This represents a traditional approach, ceremonial presence valued over active security engagement. In my 15 years with Homeland Security," Morgan continued, "I've overseen operations in domestic and international contexts. In each instance, our success depended on adaptability, situational awareness, and immediate response capability." He turned toward Collins. "Tell me, old-timer, how does standing motionless prepare anyone for the complex threats facing our nation today?" An elderly woman with a volunteer badge stepped closer. "Sir, you're being disrespectful," she said quietly but firmly. "These honor guards are distinguished veterans who've served our country with distinction." Morgan turned, assessing the volunteer with a dismissive glance. "With respect, ma'am, I'm simply highlighting different approaches to national security. A veteran who spends hours standing at a monument is not contributing to our current security challenges." Morgan stepped even closer to Collins, breaching the respectful distance maintained by other visitors. "What impresses me about Homeland Security personnel," he continued, his voice carrying across the grounds, "is that when addressed by a senior official, they respond professionally. They engage. They don't hide behind ceremonial pretense." A teenager in the crowd gasped as Morgan moved within inches of Collins, close enough that his next words were meant for the veteran alone, though they carried to those nearby. "Have you ever actually done anything meaningful in service, old man, or did they put you here because you look appropriately decrepit for a war that ended 50 years ago?" Assistant Director Morgan, a voice cut through the tension as the Pentagon liaison officer approached. "Please rejoin the delegation immediately." The ceremony's imminent start provided Morgan with his final opportunity. As the crowd shifted position for the event, he slipped away unnoticed, moving with purposeful strides toward Collins' position. "Your ceremonial watch is quite the performance," Morgan announced as he positioned himself directly in Collins' line of sight. "Impressive dedication, I'll grant you that, but at Homeland Security we focus on active threat mitigation, not symbolic gestures. Let me explain something about security protocol," Morgan continued, projecting his voice like a lecturer addressing a classroom. "Across federal agencies, there exists a universal understanding of authority hierarchies. Regardless of agency differences, professional courtesy demands that personnel acknowledge senior officials." He tapped the identification badge on his suit jacket. "Assistant Director, Department of Homeland Security, Special Operations Division. Security clearance, levels you probably haven't even heard of. Operational oversight across multiple threat vectors." His finger jabbed toward Collins. "And you?" An elderly volunteer whose primary contribution is standing still. Morgan positioned himself squarely before Collins, deliberately blocking his line of sight, a clear violation of the memorial's visitor guidelines. "Guard," Morgan announced, his voice carrying the unmistakable command tone of someone accustomed to immediate compliance. "I am Assistant Director David Morgan, Department of Homeland Security. This is a direct instruction from a senior federal security official." Morgan's voice rose with each word. Acknowledge my presence and salute me. Now." For one extended moment, Richard Collins remained perfectly motionless, his eyes fixed forward in a disciplined gaze that had remained unbroken throughout Morgan's escalating provocations. The change in Collins' demeanor was so precisely controlled that observers later described it as astonishing in its efficiency. One moment he stood in ceremonial stillness. The next, his weathered hand moved with surprising agility to gently but firmly remove Morgan's arm from his path. "Sir," Collins spoke, his voice carrying a crisp articulation that belied his aged appearance. "You are in violation of Memorial Code Section 22 regarding appropriate conduct at national monuments. Physical interference with an honor guard constitutes disrespectful behavior toward those memorialized here." Morgan's expression shifted from commanding to momentarily stunned, clearly not expecting any response, let alone one delivered with such quiet authority. Furthermore, Collins continued, his gaze now directly meeting Morgan's. "While your position commands appropriate respect within federal agencies, Memorial Grounds Protocol establishes clear guidelines regarding conduct at national monuments. The Honor Guard operates under the authority of the Veterans Administration and the Department of Defense, not Homeland Security directives. Standing Order 42 specifically addresses interaction with federal officials," Collins stated, reciting from memory with mechanical precision. "Guard will maintain position and bearing regardless of visitor status, as their duty is sworn first to honor those who made the ultimate sacrifice." His delivery remained respectful yet unyielding. "This isn't a matter of disrespect to your position, sir, but rather absolute respect for the sacred trust one have accepted in standing watch here." Collins' hand returned to his cane in a motion so fluid it seemed practiced, resuming his ceremonial position with perfect composure. "I must respectfully request you step back to the designated viewing area and refrain from further disruption of memorial protocols." Assistant Director Morgan, Colonel Matthews' voice broke the tension as he approached. "I believe there might be some misunderstanding regarding protocol at Memorial Grounds." "Your volunteer broke position to address me," Morgan stated, his tone suggesting this validated his earlier criticisms. "Indeed, sir," Colonel Matthews replied evenly. "Mr. Collins followed Memorial Ground Directive 22-3. In the event of physical interference or security concerns, Guard are authorized to respond with minimum necessary communication and action as they move to a more private corner." Matthews explained quietly, "Mr. Collins served with 5th Special Forces Group in Vietnam. 3 tours, Silver Star, 2 Bronze Stars, and a Purple Heart. After retirement, he served as a training consultant to Delta Force for 15 years. The men you see maintaining watch here aren't just elderly volunteers. They're some of the most distinguished combat veterans in American military history. In 40 years of government service across 5 agencies, I've never encountered a volunteer who refused a direct request from a senior official," Morgan stated, his posture remaining rigid. "That's because Mr. Collins wasn't refusing a request," Matthews clarified. "He was following his primary standing orders, which specify that at Memorial Grounds, protocols flow through the Veterans Administration and Department of Defense, not other federal agencies, regardless of rank." Several yards away, a retired Army colonel was explaining the situation to curious visitors. "The honor guards aren't just symbolic figures," he told them quietly. "They're distinguished veterans, many with combat decorations. Collins over there served with distinction in some of the most dangerous operations in Vietnam alongside the best special operators of his generation." The ceremony proceeded with palpable tension. Morgan found himself increasingly isolated as other officials created subtle distance between themselves and the assistant director. Across the memorial grounds, Collins maintained his post with perfect composure. If the confrontation had affected him in any way, there was no outward sign. As the delegation departed following the ceremony, several officials, including Colonel Matthews, offered respectful nods to Collins, subtle acknowledgments of professional courtesy that pointedly excluded Morgan. "They're volunteers, not security assets," Morgan said defensively as they approached the vehicles. "Federal effectiveness is measured by operational capability, not symbolic gestures." "Interesting perspective, Assistant Director," remarked the Deputy Secretary, who had remained silent throughout the earlier incidents. "Though I noted that Mr. Collins handled your challenge with remarkable poise and professionalism," His response was both appropriate and effectively delivered. Perhaps there's something to be said for the discipline these veterans maintain. As the vehicles pulled away, Morgan stared stonily through the window, his reflection showing a man still convinced of his position despite the universal lack of support. In the distance, Colin's straight-backed figure remained vigilant against the black granite wall, his unwavering dedication the final image as the motorcade departed. What does true respect for military service look like across generations? Today's story highlights how understanding different forms of service matters more than imposing one's authority. Please share your thoughts in the comments below about respecting our veterans. Have you witnessed someone failing to respect military traditions? We honor your experiences.